Hi again, it's Motor City Hamilton with another Prodigy tuning video. Today I want to talk about roll centers and how the pivots work in the car and how the O-rings work in the car. Roll center is an important tool for race car handling. It determines how weight transfers around the car during cornering. So in this video I want to cover the roll pivots, how they work, and then these pivots have a really big effect on the car. In fact, more at the rear of the car than the front. So let's sort of focus there and think about that as I talk through these options of how it works. A lower roll center essentially means more body roll in the corner. So when you get into the corner, it's going to allow the car to lean more. What that does is it pushes weight down through the spring and into the tire for more rear grip. So if you have a lower roll center, you have more rear grip because you have more weight being pressed down into the tire. On the other side, if you have a higher roll center, it limits the body roll. It won't let the car move as much. And what it does is it pushes more of the weight up into the chassis and out the side of the car and allows the car to rotate more and be more free. So it's less grip at the rear end of the car. Roll center makes a huge difference on the Prodigy cars. So let's cover some of the terminology and the parts that are available from Excelerate. There are 4 pivot locations on the Excelerate cars. The front and rear locations are called roll pivot. They mount through the plate from the bottom, and this is called the roll plate that's around the battery tray, right? These two pivots control the side-to-side motion of the chassis, and that's it. So the body roll to side and side, and that's sort of what you're used to for roll centers, thinking about side-to-side motion of the car. There's also the locations on the top here. These purple pivots are called flex pivots. And so the side locations, they mount through the top, and these control the up and down motion of the battery tray and the rear pod. So think about these as like the old pivot position back here that you would have for the pod to flex fore and aft. Think about those, but just further forward. So that's their role, is just the up and down movement of the suspension, right? And then each pivot location has a matching socket, a little plastic piece, and an O-ring that goes with it. And Excelerate now sells 4 different pivot types of heights and 4 different O-rings. So I want to talk about what each of these do on the Excelerate cars. So let's cover the pivot screws first. These are now, and I'm going to cheat because I don't want to do a lot of edits and cuts in this video. So if you guys can see that okay. The pivots are actually a little bit hard to tell apart. If you look really closely, you can see that the 0.25 pivot sort of the ball part of this rolls higher into it, where the 1.0 is much lower. So what these mean is a 0.25 pivot means that the roll center, it's the highest roll center, because this means that the ball is 0.25 millimeters below the mounting point at the end of those screws, right? The end of those threads. So from the bottom of the car, if you think about that from going in from the bottom, the ball is a 0.25 is closest to the battery tray, and a 1.0 is furthest away from the battery tray. So therefore, higher roll center or lower roll center. So the 0.25 is the highest roll center when they're put in from the bottom, and a 1.0 is the lowest roll center when they're put in from the bottom. So if you think about what this means, a 0.25 pivot is going to be highest roll center, therefore the least amount of body roll, right? And less rear grip. A 1.0, it puts it much lower in the car, so lowers the roll center and should give you more rear grip, as again, more of that energy will go through the tire and through the spring and into the tire versus out the side of the car. The pivots and sockets have to be run together. So the sockets match each of these. There are now new pivot sockets on the website that are color coded, which is super helpful. The 0.2 or the 0.75 and 0.10 sockets now have etching on the bottom to identify what they are, which is also helpful. And the 0.25 and 0.50s, they'll catch up once we're out of the current stock. They'll have etching on them as well, so that all of them will be much more easily identifiable. And then the pivot sockets are now also color coded to match this, so it's going to make it super helpful. If you have the original black sockets that came in the kits, which I still do for all of my cars at the moment, other than the 2 new ones I've bought here, the original black sockets, the 0.5 has the little line cut in the plastic, so at least that's one way you can tell those two apart. If you've mixed them up in the parts bin, you'll have to match them back up by maybe fit and feel. They're difficult to measure. It's really difficult to find their measuring point in these. You can kind of see a difference between the two on the end, but you got to sort of fit them together. The sockets won't fit correctly if you've mixed them up somewhere. And you can't mix and match these. You have to get them right. You have to use the right one for the right location. Okay, let's talk about now the flex pivots, the side locations, right? So the flex pivots, again, control the up and down motion of the suspension. So you hit a bump, or you get on the throttle, or you get off the throttle. It's this up and down motion like the old pods used to use, right? Now these all use the same parts, right? But since they mount in from the top, you have to think about them in the opposite way, right? So the pivot ball, again, from the screws is 0.25 above the pivot ball. So really 0.25 above this chassis plate, right? So the rear pod plate, the 0.25 sits 0.25 above, the 1 millimeter sits 1 millimeter above. So the 0.25, when mounted in from the top, is the lowest roll center, and the 1.0 is the highest roll center. Very important to get that right. So when you put them in from the bottom, they're opposite than when you put them in from the top. When you put them in from the top, they mean opposite ways. So lowest roll center to highest roll center, where in the roll pivot section, 0.25 is the highest roll center, and it's the opposite here, right? So that's important to understand. Now, explaining the roll center and the flex pivot position is a little bit more difficult to grasp than the roll pivots. We're used to sort of the roll pivot. We're used to understanding that weight transferring from side to side in the car. But what happens when you get on and off the throttle, I think it's just a harder thing to grasp. And I really struggled with this. I mean, I've had the car for almost a year now and really struggled to understand this. And it sort of clicked for me. I was talking to Josh a few weeks ago, and he said, it works like a motorcycle rear swing arm. And then it really clicked for me. This works just like a motorcycle rear swing arm, right? Same concept. So if you want to learn more than what I'm going to tell you today, do a bunch of searches on motorcycle rear swing arm roll center, and you'll sort of learn some of the things and techniques that they're doing to get a motorcycle in and out of corners better. So this adjustment really on the flex pivots, it really is an anti-squat adjustment, and it really controls how much the suspension is allowed to compress on accelerator and how much it's allowed to lift off accelerator, and how much forward bite you get versus rear grip, right? So in this case, if you think about raising the position, right? So a higher roll center, putting a 1.0 in here, it's going to increase the anti-squat effect. This essentially stiffens the rear suspension under acceleration. So it's not going to let it move as far or as quickly if you have a higher position in here. It's going to actually force that weight to go more forward in the car and more on the front end. So again, more forward bite, more grip off the corner, less rear grip. So you'll actually have a little less on when you get on throttle, a little less rear because it won't allow us to squat as far. And then if you think about lowering the screw, putting a 0.25 in here, what lowering does is decreases that anti-squat. It lets the car move more, and it lets it move up more. So that really does two things. By allowing the suspension to compress easier, this should keep the car more stable on the exit of the corner because more of the weight's allowed to transfer to the rear of the car. And it should also produce more turn in at corner entry as suspension is allowed to move up more quickly as you get off the throttle. The pivot screws are easy to change, and they make a big difference. I can really feel a change when I've changed one of these out, right? You'll feel it on the track pretty instantly. You don't really even need to reset tweak. You can come in, pop the screw out, pop the new one in, and go. And super easy change to make, but big change to what the car does. All of the kits come right now with 0.5 screws for the roll pivots and 0.25 screws for the flex pivots if you put it together the way the instructions show. I'm still running that setup for my GT12 on high grip tracks, but the next time I go to a club race, with maybe a new layout or a low grip track, I'm going to try lowering the roll center, from its 0.5 position to a 0.75 or a 1.0, just again to try to encourage more of that weight transfer in the corner and more into that spring and more into that rear tire for more rear grip. On the GTR, I'm the opposite. I took the 0.25s and put them in the roll, and I put the 0.5s and put them in the flex, and I was chasing, and I did those sort of in steps. I changed the roll pivots first because, again, trying to get more of the weight to go out the side of the car, not down into the spring, and that made the car rotate a lot better. And then I tried the 0.5 screws here in the flex pivots, and that also helped to get more forward bite and less rear grip. So the car rotated much, much better. I think I want to test. I'm sort of I'm as far as I can go on high roll center. I've got 0.25s in there already in the roll pivots, but in the flex pivots, I still have 2 steps I can go to try a 0.75 or 1.0 to again take away some of that anti-squat and push all that weight forward versus down, right? So that's kind of how the pivot screws work. And the last thing to talk about is the O-rings and how O-rings affect roll center. So the kit comes with the soft O-rings. So let's start there. The softest ones will allow more weight transfer, and they'll allow the suspension to move more freely from resting to compressed or decompressed. So easier movement equals more roll. So if you have the softs, this one currently does have softs because it's for my Pro 10 car. It's got softs all the way around at this point. But it'll allow this movement to happen more quickly. So I think about an O-ring change as kind of a small adjustment. Maybe it's worth half the value of a pivot ball change because it doesn't change the mechanical position of the roll center. So the roll center still stays the same, but you're just slowing that momentum and making it happen later in the corner, right? So sort of use the O-rings as sort of a minor change and use the pivot screws as a major change. So in this case, if you go to a harder one, the least weight transfer is the black. A harder one now will just slow the roll even that much further, right? So again, doesn't change the mechanical position, it just changes how quickly it can get there. So on my GT12 car, I currently am running a medium firm O-ring in the pivot location. I was trying to slow the transition of the car, right? And then on the side-to-side motion. And then I have the soft here because I was trying to really let the weight squat as much as it wants. It's a low-powered motor with a USGT motor, so I'm trying to let it just squat as much as it can and keep traction on the rear, especially when running the spool. I had a little bit of snap loose on the rear, and that sort of helped it a bit, right? The GTR is a little different. I have a medium firm here, so the green. And really, again, trying to really slow down the car. And then I have a brown, the medium, currently in the pivot here. So if I want to slow this even more, this transition, and keep weight off the rear, I could go heavier on this flex position. So that's kind of it. When the rest of the team starts posting setup sheets, you're going to start seeing a lot more 0.75 and 1.0 pivot screws used. Especially on the 1/12 cars for 17.5, 13.5, and the mod cars. Because think about what they're trying to do with that much more power and the foam tires, you really are trying to maximize rear grip. You can really get a lot of front grip out of the foam tires anyways. You're trying to maximize rear grip. So a lot of the guys are playing with lower roll centers here, and then it's a mix of what guys are trying here. So again, everyone's still learning this setting, but you'll start to look for that in the setup sheets. If anyone has questions, feel free to post them, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for listening. I hope that you have a better understanding of how the pivot options work on the Prodigy cars and how to tune them to fit your track and your driving styles. Thank you. Take care.